you all know, guys, we're going to be learning about Jamaican independence. And we're going to learn about what that means to Jamaicans. So we're going to let Doctor speak.
Okay. All right, guys. Good evening again. Really happy to be here, with this group this evening. Now, when we talk about independence in Jamaica, we talk about emancipation, I think it makes sense to start with giving a very brief history of Jamaica. Obviously, Jamaica is very intertwined with Africa in terms of our history, right? So that explanation will give a kind of context within which we can talk about independence and emancipation, right? So I don't know how much you guys know about Jamaica, but it all started, the recording or first recorded date I'm aware of. And let me give a caveat. I'm not a historian, right? I'm just now racking my brains going back to my time at school in Jamaica, what I've read. And like I said, I left Jamaica quite a number of years ago, even though I go back very often, right? So what I'm going to talk about now is from my recollection, pretty much. So our friend Christopher Columbus, he was trying to make his way to the east, and then he stumbled across the Caribbean, right? So on the second voyage, he hit Jamaica, and that was in 1494. So Jamaica started out being a Spanish colony. And you will find now in Jamaica, we still have some place names from Spanish, right? And then a couple of years after, in 1655, we had two guys from Great Britain who were in the Caribbean. And I think that they were trying to go to some country, but they got a beating, right? So on their way back to England, they couldn't go back empty-handed. So they stopped off in Jamaica and they engaged the Spanish in a fight, and they managed to capture Jamaica from the Spanish. So we became British in 1655, right? Now, during that time when the fighting was going on, slavery had somewhat started under the Spanish. And during all the melees and so on, a number of slaves managed to actually escape. And those escaped slaves started what we call the Maroons, the line of Maroons, right? So they intermarried, and we had some native Indians on the island, some Tainos, we call them. They intermarried. So they, along with their descendants, became the Maroons. And over the years, you found that there were several slave uprisings. I mean, obviously, it was very harsh conditions under which they worked. So they were always looking for ways of getting out from slavery. So those who managed to escape actually joined the other Maroons, right, in the hills. And there are two main areas now in Jamaica where we have Maroon settlements, and they are in the west and in the east of Jamaica, all right? So during the time of slavery, when the British were there, between 1655 and 1807, roughly, about 70,000 slaves were imported, from Africa, all right? And after, the main purpose obviously was to get money to send back to Europe to build the mother country. In our case, it was England, Great Britain. And in 1808, I think, the abolition bill was passed, right? Putting forward the beginning of the end of slavery. Now, a lot of folk will say that it was because the British had become sympathetic, right, towards the slaves, but we now know that that was not the case. It was pretty much that, sugar was declining. They were not able to control as much as they could, so they thought it best to abolish slavery. So even though the abolition bill was signed in 1808, emancipation never came on until 1834, right? And then obviously that's when the celebration, started. Actually, when emancipation was declared, there was a period of what they call apprenticeship. So the slaves were not actually totally free. They had to go back to the plantation to work because they had nowhere else to go. So during that period, then they were under what they call apprenticeship. And then now in 1838, I think officially, that's when full emancipation was granted, right? So, after that time, we started to get folk from the East coming into Jamaica under indentured workmanship, indentured laborers, because the slaves now no longer wanted to be on the plantation. So they started, setting out on their own, setting up plots and so on to do farming. So the colonizers had to have labor. So we had folk coming in from India, from Syria, from Lebanon, and so on. The Chinese came in as well. So in Jamaica, our motto is out of many, one people. We are 90% African descended. The rest is European descended, Asian, and so on. So we're quite a mixture in Jamaica at the moment. And round about just before 1962, then there were rumblings between the two parties at the time, local parties, about becoming independent, because everyone, started to feel that if we removed ourselves or we were removed from British rule, we would be able to control our own destiny much, much better. So, we had representation from Jamaica who went to Europe to negotiate with the colonizers. And then, we got our independence in 1962. So that was 59 years ago. And it was actually proclaimed on the 6th of August, right? So in terms of independence and emancipation, historically, or the reason behind them, they are somewhat similar, right? Because again, for emancipation, we got liberated from slavery. And then now in 1962, we actually got our political liberation, our political freedom. Now, the role of the Maroons, I think that the riots that the Maroons or the slaves had during the time of colonialism prior to the declaration of emancipation, that actually helped to pave the way towards emancipation. So the Maroons played a very pivotal role in Jamaica becoming independent, as well. Right? So the primary difference between both emancipation and independence, as I said, is emancipation was emancipation from the social elements of slavery, and independence was more the political emancipation from slavery. Right? So that would be the primary difference, I think. Yeah. Now, in terms of celebration, emancipation in the Caribbean is celebrated on August 1. And independence is on August 6th. So it's pretty much 1 week apart. So to the point now where in Jamaica, they've actually coined the word emancipendence, right? A cross between both emancipation and independence. And in Jamaica now, I think most people do not necessarily look at emancipendence in light of the liberties that we were granted after independence and before that, after emancipation. They don't focus that much on the significance of it from that perspective. They look at it more like 2 holidays, right? 2 days of fun. As a matter of fact, it's a week of fun, where people go to the beach and they have parties and so on, right? So now and again, you may find a couple of people trying to educate the public about the real meaning behind it, right? And the government does have some programs in place to highlight all of these things, right? They show the history of Jamaica coming up to emancipation and independence, who were the persons behind the fight for independence. They talk about our national heroes, all of these people who helped during slavery to push for emancipation from slavery. They talk about all the folk who helped to push Jamaica towards independence, all of the freedom fighters. And I think, Monkan, you mentioned Marcus Garvey earlier, right? So we have all of these people who helped to fight for emancipation and for independence in Jamaica, right? So the celebration, apart from the fun and so on, the government has certain festivals in place. We talked about the independence song, that Donaldson song that you just played. They have that. We have the festival queen pageantry, sorry. We have a lot of galas. We have music festivals, right? We have agricultural shows and so on. So it's a period when Jamaica and Jamaicans try to highlight all of the positive things that we've managed to garner coming out of independence, right? All of the things which are positive about Jamaica, happening at that time. Right? So, feel free to ask questions, in between, and I will give some more details if I can. Right?
Thank you, Professor Doctor. That was well explained. That was well explained. I don't know if anyone got a question.
Yeah, I have a question. You made mention of people making more aware of what it means with the emancipation and independence. What exactly are they doing, and what are they really trying to highlight to the people about this? What really happened?
All right. So usually the medium or the media that they use would be like television shows, right? Where they put together documentaries, right, on exactly what it means to be, independent. So what they're trying to show is all of the hard work and the struggles that our foreparents went through to put us in a position to be able to benefit from this freedom that we have. And the key element, I think, within that is trying to explain to them, for them to understand that the sacrifices that were made for us, and we should not let the sacrifices made by those before us go unchecked, right? We should build on all of these so that we can move forward as a country, right? So as we, party and so on, we try to raise the level of consciousness of Jamaicans to give them that solid foundation to be able to help the country to move forward. Now, mark you, it has been 59 years since Jamaica became independent. And we're still a poor, nation within the Caribbean. A lot of people compare us to Singapore, because Singapore and Jamaica were at the very same level of development a couple of years ago, right? And now Singapore is way ahead of Jamaica. So we look at things like that and we ask ourselves, why is that we have not been able to advance, right? So the whole story behind independence and struggles and fight, freedom, liberty, and so on is a way of helping Jamaicans to become a lot more conscious of where they could be, right? So that they can now be more forward thinking and then get to that level.
Yeah. So there's a real emphasis on economic development and ownership and property. I was in Jamaica, I think about 5 years ago. And if I remember correctly, they were showing bits of, I'm going to say poverty, but what they were talking about was this property was owned by those that colonized, and their children may not have wanted it, but this was an opportunity for Jamaicans to take back some of this property and really use it for economic development of the island. So is that part of it? I mean, it's the education to say, our ancestors did this, they left it for us, it's ours, let's take it. And at the same time, there was this discussion about China coming in and building highway between Kingston and some others. So what's happening in terms of economic development? Or do you know what's happening?
Yeah. So my answer to that would be economic development is at the root of other forms of development, I think. Now, the social challenges that we have in Jamaica, let's look at crime, yes? We know that crime in Jamaica is very, very bad. But to put things in place to be able to combat crime, they are relying on economic resources to put some of these things in place, right? So if we don't have the resources, then it's going to be hard to do that, right? programs to help to develop the economy include helping Jamaicans then to form businesses, start businesses. If we look at the agricultural sector, that is something which is huge in Jamaica. There are a number of programs there now to help folk to get lands, to do farming. They have assistance programs for farming. We have a national trade and investment promotion agency that provides services not only to Jamaicans, but overseas investors who might want to come down to Jamaica. Creating employment and of course, earning foreign exchange for the country. So with the increase in GDP, there's gonna be a lot more monetary resources to put behind some of these other development programs, right? When you look at Jamaica now, I was down there about 2 weeks ago, the first time in over a year. And I was amazed that for a country that we say has no money, the amount of development I see going on in Kingston, a lot of high-rise, buildings and so on. Right?
Okay.
But, what people might say is that the money in Jamaica is owned by a few, right? So what the government is trying to do through these programs is to make sure that the resources are spread as much as possible. All right, so the point you touched on about China. Now, when a country has no money, they have to look for sources, right? To get funds to be able to fund their budget, right, locally. And China, not just in Jamaica, but all over Africa, all over the rest of the Caribbean, they have been giving cheap money or lending cheap money to countries, so we gravitate towards that. The rumor in Jamaica is that the Chinese are getting lands in return, for example. I don't know, I don't have the facts, but that is what is being said right now. But when you look at the level of development, though, using the funds that the government has managed to garner, you do see the impact. You see the highways in Jamaica you just mentioned. They are still building highways in some of the underserved areas. So there are a lot of benefits there from all of these funds coming in. The only question or the only challenge, I think, is for the government to make sure that they're able to repay all of these loans without giving up too much. Right? So that is in their hands.
Yes.
Yeah, that is in their hands.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, you are welcome.
I have a question pertaining to the Maroons.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know from the Maroons, they were recognized culturally and everything in Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking with a Guyanese friend earlier today, and he was saying that the Maroons were recognized as an independent nation in Jamaica. And I said, well, I know they were recognized culturally and everything, but I don't know if they were given the status as an independent nation within Jamaica. Also, he tried to get me to believe that the Maroons and some other Jamaicans are indigenous to the island. So we started to go back and forth about the transatlantic slave trade and how many Black Jamaicans came to Jamaica via the transatlantic slave trade. And he was adamant that Black Jamaicans and Maroons are indigenous to the islands. And I said, well, how can Maroons claim to be indigenous to the island when Nanny and Kwaku and all of their leaders claim to be from Ghana, from the Akan ethnic group in Ghana? And you also have some from Nigeria and other groups among the Maroons. So I said, how can they claim to be indigenous to the island when their own oral history links them to Nanny, who is supposed to be Akan, Cujo, and a few of their heroes who all have Akan names. Can you shed light on the status of the Maroons in Jamaica, their legal status, and their position in Jamaica and this whole indigenous movement that I see going on, not only in Jamaica, but in America and a few other places, a lot of Black and brown people are claiming to be indigenous to these places, when history says that our ancestors were brought over during the transatlantic slave trade. They're saying we were always here.
Yeah. All right. So the first part of the question having to do with the status of the Maroons, they are not independent nations, no. They have their own form of self-government, though, within the ambit of the national government. So there are two primary, groups, Windward Maroons and Leeward Maroons, and they have their own councils, their own, like I said, internal self-government. They have their chiefs and so on. They have their practices, but they are not independent of Jamaica, right? So they are governed within Jamaica. They are not separate nations, yes? In terms of, I'm sorry?
That's what I was trying to explain to this gentleman.
Yeah.
But he was adamant that that they received some type of independent status within Jamaica. And I just wanted to put that out there because you may have other viewers who may have heard this information and maybe thinking along that line as well.
Yeah, it's a question of semantics and how they view it, but I can understand what that person is saying. That might be related to what I just explained, that they have their own internal self-government, their own internal rules, right, among themselves. But like I said, the Constitution of Jamaica, the laws of Jamaica, they are still under those laws. They are still governed by Jamaica nationally, yeah? So it's almost like, I would say you have an association then within your town. So you have your own set of rules and so on that you abide by, but you're still within your town, right? Civilly, you're still within the town. So that is how it is in Jamaica, right now. In terms of the indigenous part of it, I don't know if they're saying that the Maroons have been there from day one in Jamaica, right? But yes, you're correct. They never came from Jamaica originally. The slaves, our ancestors, were never ever in Jamaica originally. They started during slavery. The original people in Jamaica were what we call Taino Indians. They moved up from Central America, from the Yucatan Peninsula, up into the Caribbean, right? So we had the Arawaks, we had the Tainos, we had the Carib Indians, right? So when the first set of Europeans came before slavery, the Spanish, they came across the Indians there, right? And then the Spanish, they started to bring in the enslaved Africans, and followed by the British, yeah? So obviously there were no Black people there before Columbus came. So in terms of being indigenous in that sense, no, we are not indigenous. But in terms of our being the first set of people there, and then obviously we've had descendants over the years, maybe that's what he's saying, we can now be considered to be indigenous. The Maroons can be considered to be indigenous because their whole lineage, the Maroon lineage, started way back then in the 1400s, between 1495 and since then. The connection that we have with Africa, especially West Africa, where most of the slaves come from, that connection is still very, very strong. And we can see it in our language. We have a local Creole that we call Jamaican Patois. Most of the African words that we have, they come from West Africa. There's the Niger-Congo region of West Africa where most of the slaves came from. If you look at the structure of our Jamaican Patois, our local language, it is related to that set of languages from the Niger-Congo region of West Africa. We still have words that they still use there in West Africa in our language in Jamaica, right? When you look at the food, for example, we eat similar foods that the slaves came across with, right? Some of the words that we use to describe the food is the same word in certain languages in Ghana, in Akan, in Ewe, right? So that connection is there. So in terms of being indigenous, no, we came from Africa. That's where it all started. All right.
Thank you for sharing that. I knew, I just wanted to confirm.
Yeah.
And I'll put that out there once again to the public for those who don't have understanding about the transatlantic slave trade.
Yeah.
To me, honestly, I feel that is disrespectful to our ancestors to deny that part of our history, to deny the suffering of our ancestors that transpired during the transatlantic slave trade and during our ancestors' enslavement on the island. The suffering that they had to go through, and to deny all that and say that they were already there, that all of this transatlantic slave trade history is a lie. I believe that does a dishonor and it's disrespectful to our ancestors that were brought over to the island.
Yeah, and you know, when you go to Jamaica, especially now over the past couple of years, Jamaicans have become a lot more conscious of the connection between ourselves and West Africa. In school, you know, we're taught history, but we were taught history from one perspective. But then, you know, over the years, we've started to look at the other side. We're looking more now at the side of the actual slaves, see what they went through, how they fought, and so on. So now, I think even more than ever, we have become a lot more attached to Africa. So, you know, we talked about DNA tests, for example. That has become very popular among folk from the Caribbean and from here in North America, right? We have that connection. So we talked about the Maroons a while ago, for example, but one very important group in Jamaica as well is the Rastas, right? So the Rastas, they have helped a whole lot to heighten the consciousness about our connection with Africa, right? To the point now where I remember my first time in West Africa, I was in Ghana. And just knowing I was from Jamaica, everybody was asking questions about Bob Marley and so on, right? And then I got to understand that they looked at Jamaica based on what they had heard, based on the music, the lyrics in the songs, right? They felt that Jamaica was one of the countries outside of Africa, one of the diaspora countries that was most closely attached to Africa still. Because these Rastas were talking about going back to Africa, they were talking about things that were Black, things that were connected. So for them, it was very, very positive, yes? And by the same token, we in Jamaica, we grew up, you know, hearing stories about Africa, about wild animals and jungles and so on. So we had a certain impression. But then, you know, over the years, we started to read more and more, and we realized that what we were taught or the impression we got based on what we were reading was not totally correct, was not correct. I mean, I can tell you, I was amazed. I went from Nigeria to Abidjan, right? And I was in Abidjan the night I got there. We were out walking, and I was saying, wow, look at all these skyscrapers. It looks like a little Manhattan. You see what I'm saying? So it's totally different from what we had in our mind based on what we had learned, you know, before. So a lot of us now, apart from that part of it, we just want to have a connection with our ancestors, right? Here, you know, you hear about the other people whose ancestors came over on the Mayflower, they can be traced and so on. We somewhat felt kind of lost because our direct connection was broken at the time of slavery, right? So with these DNA tests and so on now, they're helping us now to really get closer to Africa in terms of making that direct connection. And it's absolutely wonderful.
Yes. Dr. Smith, can I ask you a question? What are you doing now? You said you're in Miramar. What are you doing?
Okay, in terms
of profession?
My profession, I'm a business management consultant. I spent a couple of years, wow, I've done so many things. I worked with the Jamaican government in the Jamaican embassy in Brussels, doing trade and investment promotion. And then I worked in the High Commission in London for a couple of years, doing the same thing. And then I moved to America and I was involved in the remittances business. I worked with Western Union Money Transfer.
Okay.
And up to last year, my last corporate job was head of the Caribbean for MoneyGram Money Transfer.
Okay.
So I
Wonderful.
just started my own business now, doing management consulting.
And you chose Miramar, or you had been there since you got here?
Miramar chose me. Yeah, I was in Pembroke Pines first. My wife is Jamaican, right? But she lived in Pembroke Pines. So we got married years ago when I was in Belgium. So she moved to Brussels with me. And then once we got tired of Europe, we came to the States. So naturally, we ended up in Pembroke Pines. And then,
Right.
then we moved to Miramar next door.
Well, so a lot of people don't know, but there's a beautiful Jamaican community where you are. I mean, it's like home.
And that's what I said in the very beginning as well. Here, you feel like you're in Jamaica. Right?
Yeah.
I have a nephew who called me and he said, boy, he wanted to move down to Florida, but he needed a space to plant trees and so on. And I said, yeah, that is the way to go, because here you have mangoes, you have coconuts, you have the sunshine, you have the sea, just like Jamaica.
Right.
Jamaican restaurants, it's absolutely. As a matter of fact, Miami, they call it Kingston 21, right?
Yeah. No, I did not know that, but okay.
Oh, yes. Miami is known as Kingston 21. Guys, we have 21 zones in Kingston, yes? Like the zips. So we go up to Kingston 20 in Jamaica. So Miami now referred to as Kingston 21 because there are so many Jamaicans there, yeah. It feels like home. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm up in Palm Beach, and yes, absolutely, it's all over, which really makes Florida a great place because of the Caribbean, the South American, and African is just so diverse that you hear everybody's music and you can taste everybody's food, so it's great.
Yeah, it's a good mix. It's a good mix. But for me, the whole connection with Africa, it started when I went to school in France as well. I did my first postgrad degree there. It was a student's town, yeah. So it was the first time I was actually living among so many Africans, and to me it was an eye opener. The whole culture, learning firsthand. So to this day, I still have very close friends from there. Some of them have come to Jamaica, and so on. So the connection is there, and it's really amazing. The whole feeling, yeah, the whole feeling.
That's amazing. Thank you. Well, I've got one question, Doctor. It's about Jamaican governor in Jamaica and Jamaican governor. When Jamaica got their independence on the 6th of August 1962, they was given a British governor. And then I think he stayed for 11 years. And then they had all Jamaican governors today. My question is that why does the Jamaica need a governor as a free, independent country?
That's a very, very good question, right? All right, so Jamaica is part of what we call the Commonwealth, right? Yeah. And the Commonwealth is made up of former British colonies, right? So since then, we've pretty much maintained the status quo where the Governor General actually represents the Queen of England, right? And it's pretty much, to me, the ceremonial. But there are countries in the Caribbean, including Jamaica, that have been talking about becoming republics. As a matter of fact, we have 3 already. We have Guyana, that became a republic. They got rid of the Queen. Now they have a president and a prime minister. Yeah. We also have Trinidad and Tobago. I forgot the 3rd one, but I know that Barbados, their prime minister has said that come November 1, they will become a republic. And we in Jamaica, we've been talking about this for the longest while, right? But I think that they're saying no, because the Governor General is pretty much ceremonial, they are not spending so much time now debating becoming a republic. It's gonna happen, I know, but they are saying that they have more pressing things to discuss. But to answer your question directly, it came out of that, and it's pretty much ceremonial.
Okay.
Representing the Queen, yes.
So he doesn't have any power over the or anything like that, no.
No.
In that regard, tell me about Manley. I remember that name, Manley in Jamaica. Who was he?
Michael Manley.
Michael Manley, yeah.
Yeah. Michael Manley played a very pivotal role in Jamaica's political history and economic history as well. I think the first time he came into power was in 1971, 72, somewhere thereabouts, yes? So at that time, I remember being a kid, he came in with this doctrine called democratic socialism, right? Yes. So he was closely aligned to the left, right? So he and Russia, the USSR at the time, you had Castro from Cuba, they were very closely aligned, right? So he brought in this democratic socialism, where he was saying that, and to illustrate his points, he would say, for example, you have 3 houses, whilst your neighbor has none, the person next door. Why do you need 3? What we're going to do is to make sure that that neighbor who has none gets a house. So you found that people, I think, took that very literal. So there was a lot of upheaval at that time where people actually packed up and left Jamaica. Yeah. And then when they realized that it was really a bark and not a bite, they tried to come back. But by then things had really, gotten out of their control in terms of being able to purchase back, right? But apart from that, though, the whole socialist thing helped Jamaica to a certain extent. In that we started to look at our own internal way of developing the country rather than depending on external factors. For example, the emphasis was placed on production locally for local consumption. And you found industry started to flourish at that time because we couldn't import certain items. The food industry, we started to process foods, making things like cornflakes and cereals. The shoe industry, people started to come up with nice designs and making them locally and so on, yeah? So in that respect, it did help the whole revolution. Education became free. When I went to university in Jamaica, I don't think I would have been able to had it not been during that time in the 70s, in the 80s, because it was free. Yes, so a lot of benefits came through that, but unfortunately, or fortunately for some people, that changed after Manley, departed power, right? And then things went back to how they are right now. But he was very pivotal, during that time in terms of Jamaica's development. And I think that there was a lot of opposition as well from the US because, Manley was allied with Cuba, allied with Russia. And then we all know the history of the Cold War between the United States and Russia, the left countries. And to this day, Cuba is still under embargoes, right? But we did get quite a number of benefits from that time, from that association. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Self-economic development.
Yes. Internal development. And even now today, they keep talking about, to be able to move forward, we have to start producing. We have to start consuming our own production.
Yeah.
It is happening to a certain extent, but I think that the verve and the drive during that time is not so much there. I mean, I'm not on either side. I'm just explaining from my perspective what I see, what I saw and what I see now. Yeah.
Right. I can understand it. This whole dependence. If you're always dependent upon, then you cannot do it internally. So, yeah. Thank you. That was clear.
Okay. Good. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Any other comments?
I have one question for you, Dr. Smith.
Yeah.
How would you describe Jamaica post-emancipation in just 3 words?
Whoa. Post-emancipation in 3 words.
That's one word.
All right. Post-emancipation. I'd say consciousness. One. I would say destiny, right? And I would say advancement. I mean, advancement can be relative. Some people will say, well, you advance backwards or forwards, but for me, it's actually looking forward at all times, right? Because if you want to grow, you have to keep looking to the future, and that to me is advancement. Sometimes you may have hiccups, right? You may have hurdles, but for me, every challenge, every hurdle is an opportunity. You know, you have a hurdle, there must be a way of going over the hurdle or going around the hurdle, right? So that is always advancement for me. So that's how I would look at it.
Yeah, so the future is very optimistic in Jamaica.
Yes, absolutely. You always have to have that vision, you know, being optimistic. Always look at the goal, looking
Absolutely.
forward. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Good.
Can I ask just one other question to it? Just hit me. What kind of investment is Jamaica getting from those of you that are in the United States?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a lot of investment or not? Is it strategic? Is it, you know, in order to bring where you want Jamaica to go?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a lot going on in terms of diaspora, right? So in Jamaica, we have now about 2.8 million people, right? And outside of Jamaica, the numbers vary. You know, we go up to like 2 million, yeah? But when you look at the contributions, the raw contribution in terms of money that we send, that Jamaicans overseas send to Jamaica, it amounts to about 2.4 billion US dollars every year, right? And that $2.4 billion that we send to Jamaica, that is about 15% of Jamaica's GDP, right? So you can see that we're funding Jamaica's budget, 15%, right? So that's quite substantial, right? And that doesn't take into consideration all the other things that we do through, you know, goods and services going to Jamaica. So indirectly, when you look at all that money that goes to Jamaica that we send to our relatives, who benefits? I send money to my, like say, sister in Jamaica, yeah? She uses that to help her kid to go to school. She uses that to go to the grocery store, right? She goes to the grocery store, that grocery store owner, he makes an income from what my sister spends, right? Then he's able to send his kids to school, right? He pays taxes to the Jamaican government. Jamaican government gets money to build the roads, right? When the roads are built, investors come in because transportation is easy and so on. So it's all intertwined indirectly, right? Now, in terms of direct contribution, you have several agencies in Jamaica that work with diaspora Jamaicans to invest in certain areas, right? And you know, pretty much whatever it is that you want to do in Jamaica, they will feed you information about what the openings are, what you could possibly look at if you have no idea, or if you already have an idea of what you want, they will help to guide you in terms of things like incorporation of the company, in terms of business plan, in terms of helping with export markets if you want to go into production and so on, yeah? So you do find that they have direct concerted programs established to help diaspora, you know, Jamaicans. In fact, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Jamaica, they have a diaspora affairs unit that works specifically with Jamaicans who want to contribute to the country. Apart from investments, you know, for revenue generation to earn profits, they have programs as well where Jamaicans contribute to charities. You know, a lot of foundations run by Jamaicans overseas to get money to Jamaica, to get hospital equipment to Jamaica and so on, right? Right. So when you look at the entire sphere of activities, is very, very vast in terms of the contributions that we make to Jamaica.
And you feel it's I know it's doing its job, but is there more opportunity that could be given in terms of investment? And I'm talking about, you know, businesses and things like that in Jamaica by those that are in the diaspora outside, specifically in like South Florida area and others.
Yeah, definitely. There are always there's always room for more, you know, for more to be done. Right. There are many opportunities there. Yeah. One thing that I think the Jamaican government could do a lot more is to actually pre-package investment projects specifically geared towards Jamaicans overseas. Almost like they can go and pick it off the shelf, right? Pick a package off the shelf. Because sometimes, you know, you might have an idea about a project and the time that you take to go and do the research, even though they are there to help you, right? If they already had a prepackaged that you could look at it and say, well, look, this looks like it's within my sphere,
Yes.
and then go
Yes.
for it, yeah?
I see that. You could
Yeah.
do. They could do that in real estate as an example.
Yeah.
Put a fund together for particular areas where you need it. And
Yeah.
a lot of us, not just the diaspora Jamaicans, but a lot of us might buy into that if we knew, like you said, that it was going to be done in a right way by the government and otherwise. So,
Right,
okay,
right,
thank
right,
you.
right.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's well explained again.
All right.
I have a question. I have a question, if I may.
Pamela.
I wanted to know, as far as the Chinese and the people from that culture, what is Jamaicans benefiting from them coming over and pretty much just doing like illegal loans to gather the land there? Are the people benefiting from this? Are they getting jobs? What are they getting?
Illegal loans. Can you clarify? When you say
Yes, what I call illegal loans is the money that they're giving, that they're having to pay for all this land. They know these people can't pay back this money, yet they're getting tied into these loans. The government is tying the Jamaican government into the loans there, saying that they're going to offer so many jobs for the people. I'm just wondering, what are the people benefiting from this?
Yeah. All right. So in terms of the actual negotiation between the Jamaican government and the Chinese government for the loans and so on, I'm not too, I don't know much about that, right? I mean, I've been reading just like you about disgruntlement and so on, right? But in terms of benefits, here are the benefits that I see to Jamaica. Again, not talking about all the money part of it where, the construction of the highways, for example. Yes, I'm hearing that a lot of Chinese have come in, right, to provide the building services. Yeah, it's their technology, but I think that there are Jamaicans working with them. You have Jamaican companies that are subcontracted. So this is a way where technology, the knowledge of technology, can be transferred to Jamaicans so that later on they can actually do things of this kind on their own, right? So you have transfer of knowledge, transfer of technology. That's one, good benefit, I think. If you look at a practical example of the highway construction, where I'm from in Jamaica, the eastern part, St. Thomas, it's what they refer to as the most underdeveloped part of Jamaica, right? On the North Coast, you have fancy highways, you feel like you're in the United States. Whilst in my parish, the roads are very narrow. There are certain parts where you feel like you're driving through a riverbed, yeah? So we are the last ones now to be getting good roads, and that is actually happening right now. But let me tell you what the situation has been. I remember a couple of years ago, they were looking at building a dormitory community outside of Kingston for people who work there, but who couldn't afford accommodation there, right? They were looking for somewhere nearby where people could set up communities to live. And St. Thomas, my part of the country, was shortlisted because we are just outside of Kingston. It was the first one that they crossed off the list. Why? Because of roads, yes? So now that the roads are being built, St. Thomas is being seen as the frontier now for investment for development. So a lot of people are now positioning themselves to, one, move to St. Thomas. Properties are selling now, yes, in St. Thomas. We know that people are gonna come there because of the roads. People are gonna be living there. And once they come, people are gonna be setting up businesses, right? So that will create employment. And also people from the parish can actually set up businesses, right? The population increases, you're gonna have needs for supermarkets, for restaurants, and so on, right? So what I'm trying to say here is the Chinese come in, they build the roads bring in more people, more investors from overseas, right? More construction, that creates employment, more opportunities. You see where I'm going? So I understand what your question is, but I don't know too much about that side. I can only talk about what I see in terms of the social development and economic development based on what the Chinese are doing in Jamaica, right? So it's not just a one single thing that we need to look at. We need to look at all of the spin-offs, right? So at the end of the day, even if the loans are expensive, right, there are going to be a lot more benefits for Jamaicans for their own social and economic development. So I don't know if that explains it somewhat, how I see it. At least that is my perspective.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, okay, all right. Mm-hmm.
Can I say something quickly?
Sure.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm really loving the discussion. As it relates to how is Jamaica involved in the diasporans?
You went on mute. Yeah?
Went on mute, yeah.
Okay, yes, sorry about that. So I'm saying that the Jamaican government has been, coming up with initiatives to involve the diasporans across the world, Jamaicans across the world. For example, the other day they had a sustainability symposium. Dr. Peter, I don't know if you remember that, but it was like June 16 to 17. There was a symposium by the government, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And basically they tell the people in the diasporans about the opportunities here. So I don't know if you all know, but Jamaica has had or has boasted to have one of the highest performing stock exchange market in the world. So that is one of the places where, we can invest. And of course, real estate is something that has been a growing thing even now more than ever, because I think it's, in a sense, a bit more easier. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Smith, if I'm wrong, but I think it's easier to own a piece of land compared to back in the day. I think because of the National Housing Trust and all of that, there are more opportunities, and the banks are coming and playing their roles and so on. So I'm just adding that there are things in place trying to involve the diasporans in other areas of investment and development. Yeah.
Yeah, you're totally right, Christian. Yes, I mean, there are a lot of agencies, a lot of services to assist those in diaspora to get things done in Jamaica, right? And you mentioned investment. You mentioned the stock market, one of the top performing stock markets. And even simple things like saving money in Jamaica, you get a lot more in the returns than, say, here in the States, for example. The National Housing Trust in Jamaica, they also allow folk in the diaspora who have worked in Jamaica to continue contributing to the NHT, the National Housing Trust, and so to be able to get benefits from them, even though we live overseas, right? So there is that very strong connection between Jamaica and the diasporans of Jamaica.
Okay, I've got one more question, Doctor. Again, I'm going to go back on the Maroons. So it's more about you see, like the couple of weeks ago, I was watching a video, the chief Maroon, Richard Curry, he was fighting against American company, wanted to exploit and take the resources in African compound. So the Maroon, can they actually keep everything they got in the territory? And can the government develop that area as well? Or is it left to them to develop the area? I know you got free settlement, you got one in St. Mary, you got one in, is it Portland? And
Portland, yeah.
Elizabeth, So free settlement, can they actually, everything in the soil belong to them? Or can the government come over there and then build school, build road, or they have to do that themselves with what they got?
All right, okay. I think the government is still responsible overall, right, for infrastructure in Jamaica, yes? Now, in terms of the fine points between what the Maroons should do on their own, I don't know, right? I think it comes to a question of negotiation between both. All right, if you look at it now, I think what you referred to a while ago has to do with bauxite in Jamaica, right? Now, at one time, Jamaica was the largest exporter of bauxite in the world. And, the country still makes a lot of money. So now they've identified reserves. in an area controlled by the Maroons, right? And that's where the chief and the other Maroons are now, you know, fighting them for bauxite mining not to take place, right? Within, because they feel it's sacred, they have their ancestors there. And not only that, you know, they're very conscious about the environment. And bauxite has created quite a lot of problems in Jamaica in terms of the environment, yeah? So the fact that now they're negotiating or they're fighting or they're debating or discussing means that there's something there between both which is not clear. Because the government is saying, yes, I'm coming in. Maroons are saying, no, you cannot come in, right? I think that they've come to some kind of agreement. I'm not sure, but in terms of the fine point about the legalities, I'm not too sure what they are.
Yeah. Can I add something here? I think what I've understood is that back in, you know, during, I think there was a war a long time ago, and between the British and the Maroons, you know, trying to get independence, and they had a treaty signed where they were given the right to their land. So at the end, they came to a resolution, right? So that they had authority over the land that was given them and all of that. So till now, I think they have a lot of power in a sense. It's like, because they have that written, it's signed and everything. That's what they use to negotiate. So whenever the government wants to do something, there still has to be some debate or collaboration, some talking, because it's not that, even though Jamaica is the owner of everything, I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. They're not necessarily free or independent, but at the same time, they still have rights based on what their ancestors, their forefathers have already fought for, and they have the proof of it. So they actually know their rights, and they do whatever it is to benefit from that. So
to protect it,
I hope that kind of shed some light on that.
So if I understand, the government can decide that they want to develop something maybe in Manchester, they can just go there and do it. But if they want to do anything in the free settlement, they need to negotiate before they
have to negotiate,
Okay. Get it. I think I had all the questions. Now, anyone else got a question? I'm going to let anyone else ask.
Yeah.
I have two questions. First, thank you so much for the presentation. I really appreciated it. My first question is regarding the...
I'm hardly hearing you.
Oh, God. Okay, I'm trying to... Did any better?
A lot better, yes.
Yeah, okay. So thank you so much for the presentation. I have two questions. The first question is regarding the relationship between Jamaica and the UK, and Jamaica and the other Commonwealth countries. I was wondering if there was an attempt at the beginning to create a country, including Jamaica and other islands, because I guess they're all small islands, so maybe it would be interesting to have them all together. So is there an attempt to do that in the future? Because I heard a lot about the Caribbean community trying to have common educational system and so on. So is there a plan for that? This is the second part of the first question. And the second question is regarding comparison between Jamaica and African countries, because since you studied in France, you met other Africans, I guess. So you could travel to Africa. So what do you think Africa can learn from, or West African countries, what they can learn from Jamaica, and what Jamaica can learn from West Africa, and what we can do together? How do you see that?
All right. So the first question about the Caribbean islands, in fact, there is a conglomerate, yes. Yeah, you mentioned it, CARICOM, right? Which is in force, which is in play, and CARICOM works together. The grouping works together on several fronts, right? So if you look at, say, you mentioned education. There is a common education system within the Caribbean among these countries, where the exams or the curriculum pretty much might vary slightly, but all towards the same exams at the end of your high school. Same exams, this very same exams in the Caribbean. So on that front, yes, they're already doing that. In terms of being an economic pact, there are treaties or agreements between the different islands, or within the group, I should say, right? Where, for example, goods produced in one country, as long as there's certain value of the goods produced in one country, then they can access the other countries within the group duty-free, right? When they negotiate extra regionally, let's say with the European Union, they negotiate as a group, right? So whatever benefits accrue to one will accrue to the others because they negotiate, right? So yes, like in any family, you might have some differences here and there because they do have some differences or disagreements or slight amount of discords among themselves within Caribbean, within CARICOM. But overall, though, they are a cohesive unit that handles their business based on the point that you just raised a while ago. So it is in force, something which is happening right now. And then the other question you had about what is it that we could learn from Africa? One of the things we could learn from Africa a lot more is, well, something very, very fundamental, because I explained about my impression of Africa when I went there first in terms of the level of development and so on, which I saw. I think that we could educate ourselves in Jamaica and in the Caribbean a lot more about really what Africa is, because to this day I still think that we have certain impressions, yes? And in many respects, countries in Africa are far more advanced than we are in certain regards, right? So I think that learning more about Africa would be of great benefit to us in the Caribbean. One of the big things I think would be in the area of business, right? Most of our business in the Caribbean is done with the United States next door and with Europe, primarily the UK. But there's hardly anything happening between us and Africa, right? And the fact is that there are so many similarities between them and us that there are things I think that we could do of benefit on the economic side between both, yeah? So in terms of learning, I think learning more about each other, our practices, and how we are in terms of business and so on, that would help us a lot more to capitalize on some of the opportunities I see existing. Tourism. I mean, a lot of Jamaicans would love to see what Africa is like. When you go to Africa, being Jamaican, everybody is like, you are a celebrity. Everybody wants to come to Jamaica. Everybody wants to learn about Bob Marley and so on. Everybody wants to come to see what this small country that is so very powerful in the world, is, right? And apart from simply learning about each other in that way, then we can also, come much closer together in terms of economic development on both sides. We're small, yes, compared to Africa, but there are certain benefits I think that Africa could, get from being closer to us in Jamaica and in the Caribbean at large. Still wide open to be conquered. So I don't know if those answer your questions.
Boris?
Maurice?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Great,
you're
great answers.
welcome. Mm-hmm.
Quick question on that though. Is there much import-export between Jamaica and Africa that you know of? Especially in the agricultural area.
I would say no, not that much. There is a certain amount going on between us and West Africa to a certain extent, like Nigeria, but it is still very, very small, right? And something else I think we could partner on, again, in terms of investment, in terms of business, right?
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier that there are a lot of similarities between us and West Africa. All right, one primary example. Akis, Jamaica's national dish, right? Everybody overseas, everybody will give anything to get akis, yes? But then when you go to Ghana, when you go to Togo, you see all these ackee trees growing wild and nobody does anything with them, right? Now, we have a huge diaspora population in the United Kingdom, right? So rather than producing akis here, canned, exported to Europe, that transportation cost, because of the weight of it, it adds to the price, right, of the end product.
Yeah, right.
Africa is just down the road, right? So all of those akis could be used to produce akis and then sold in the market. The same thing with coconut oil, coconut products. You have coconut trees all over West Africa. We could use some of those, by lending our technology, investing there to benefit, those locally, and then, generate revenues for both sides. So that is just one minute example of the possibilities that exist for business.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah. That kind
That's
of collaboration. Beautiful. Yeah. And the good thing too is that accessing the European market, there is a pact among the African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries, right, where we have an agreement with Europe for certain access to the markets there, right?
Yes.
So, going to Africa, West Africa, and setting up a facility there, we can benefit as well from the same access, right? So there are loads of possibilities.
Well, when you really think about the slave trade, really it was for the products that the slaves were doing for the European market. Yeah. Well, we still have those products, but now we own the process, so we can still supply Europe because they still want it. But now we own it. Yeah. Oh,
there we go.
And that's a global thing. That's a global thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And recently I was reading, I have a source in Jamaica to a certain extent where you send your raw material overseas, right? And you get a pittance on it, right? And then the product, the raw material is transformed overseas. And then overseas now they make the biggest chunk of the value, right? So I was seeing something recently where in Ghana, the president was saying to the Swiss, for example, you take our chocolate, we get our cocoa beans, we get nothing from it, right? You transform it into chocolate, and you get it. Now we want to do that transformation ourselves here in Africa so we can benefit more from the full value of it, right? The same thing in the Congo with the, what do you call it? Something that they used to make cell phones. Right?
Yes. Yeah, the raw material, yes.
Yeah, it's very arduous to get that raw material, and they purchase it from overseas for little and nothing. And then when you need to buy a cell phone here, the cell phone costs you $1,200 US, right?
Right.
So if we were able to pool our resources and our knowledge and so on, we could be making a lot more. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's exactly right. And the manufacturing process in Africa, you don't send it somewhere. We do the manufacturing and we sell it to them. And that's exactly what I was talking about in terms of investment in Jamaica. I was really thinking of machinery, manufacturing, assembly, those kinds of things for a broader market. But I'm just glad to hear that kind of thought and vision is being done right now. That's great. That's the only way we're going to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And guess what? I mean, when you look at a finished item, right? If there's one part of that process that we do well in Jamaica, that we don't, we do that part. Trinidad does another part better than us. So we send it to Trinidad, they add their part to it. And lo and behold, everybody benefits from it. Yeah?
Right. That's exactly what the Chinese have done. They put the manufacturing in China. They get all the parts and logistics from everywhere else, and then they sell it back to you. And now they're all over. So that's what we need to.
Yeah, we need to, because individually we're very, very small, but combined we can be a
combined. Yeah, we could be the epicenter for something in the Caribbean. And all right, well, thank you very much. I get it. This has been great.
Okay, good. All right. I guess I guess that's that.
Yes.
Unless there's anything else.
Unless anyone want to add anything, so that was a lot of information.
Yeah,
I really do appreciate.
yeah, man, it was absolutely wonderful because we moved away from talking about the Maroons and independence to to collaboration, which is really key. Yeah.
I forgot. I had a question, but and then I completely forgot. My question was that I mean I've watched a lot of videos and everything, so I just wanted to know was an independence a gift to Jamaica or did they fought for that?
Wow. I think to a certain extent we fought for it, yes. Because when you look at even from just going back to the Maroon days, right? Because as I said, independence, I think, was a culmination of everything that happened from the first riot of the slaves through emancipation, right? Because emancipation, what led up to that too was a lot of demonstration of force, for want of a better expression, right? You had uprisings, you had the rebellion, the rebellion, they call it, right? Where Black land or post-emancipation, the Africans were saying, well, look, you're saying that we're independent or we are emancipated, but we still don't have access to lands to grow, we don't have anywhere to live and so on. So they started to make representations to the governing body from the UK who were in Jamaica, right? Okay. So for me, independence was a culmination of all of the struggles along to say, hey, look, we need to have our full independence, our full freedom, right? And I think, Britain, they got to the stage where they realized it was becoming a lot harder to control, the colonies, to control Jamaica. The benefits that they were getting before through forced slavery no longer existed. So for them, it was a losing proposition, I think, to continue to have dominance over Jamaica in that respect. So I think it was not so much a matter of them handing it to us on a platter, but more our having fought for it.
Okay. Right. Okay. I know that you travel and you live in different countries, including France, Belgium, the UK, Cameroon as well. So what is your opinion on you see the French, they colonized the majority part of Central Africa. Then the British, they colonized Nigeria, Ghana, and all that. When you look at in Africa, you're going to see that the country were colonized by Britain, they're doing much better than the country colonized by the French. So what is your opinion about it? Okay, so again, this is based on what I've kind of gleaned. And, talking about, say, the Caribbean, before I talk about Africa, Haiti, for example, was the first independent country, right? And unfortunately or fortunately, being the first, there were certain things that they would not have been able to benefit from. For example, learning from how other independent countries had done it, right? So they were pretty much like the guinea pigs. And just like in slavery, where reparations were paid to the slave owners by Britain, right, for losing all of that property, in Haiti, they actually made the Haiti government pay for the losses of the owners, right? France. So that is one of the reasons, I think, why France, the French colonies maybe are not in as good a position as the former British, colonies. When you look at Africa, the atrocities that were committed by, like Belgium, in terms of the Congo, right? The agreements that they negotiated where the former French colonies had to deposit funds in accounts and so on, right? All of that was really, really atrocious. That not having happened for the British colonies, I think that really helped to put the former French colonies in a very bad position compared to the former British colonies, yes? Yeah.
Like, I have a question now. What if you compare the living standard in islands like Jamaica and island like Martinique or Guadeloupe. Would you say that it's higher in Jamaica or more in the French colony territories?
Yeah, more in the French colonies, I think. And you know, unfortunately for us in Jamaica, you know, coming out of independence where you pretty much had to rely on your own, yes, there are gonna be some growing pains, right? In terms of economic benefits and so on, right? Whilst Martinique, still being French, they were able to get direct subsidies for their development, right? So you find Martinique, Guadeloupe, they are more developed than, say, you know, a Jamaica is. Now, the question that folk will ask though is, you know, the price of still being tied to the European country in that manner, right? Is it more beneficial as opposed to, say, a Jamaica that left colonial rule such a long time ago, right? Because it could be then that we are well on our way to really being able to manage our own affairs to the point where we become developed, let's put it that way, right? When you look at Guadeloupe, for example, they are now clamoring to become independent of France. Does it mean then that the stages that Jamaica has gone through and is going through will be the same things that Guadeloupe will go through? In other words, not being able to benefit directly from all the subsidies that they get from the French government. Will they go through the same process as us now, where their level of development maybe will not accelerate as much as they expect? You know, I don't know. But in a nutshell, to answer your question, they are more developed than we are in Jamaica on the whole.
I guess the current British territories in the Caribbean might also be more developed. I get Cayman Islands and...
Yes. Well, yeah. And I think with Cayman Islands, I mean, they are still British. Yes. They are, you know, their per capita is much higher than, say, a Jamaica. Turks and Caicos, the same thing. They are British. Anguilla, still British. You find them to be a lot more developed. But it could also be because of their size.
Yeah.
You know, they have fewer people and they have free money, I should say, you know, coming in. So that, I think, maybe has contributed to it. When you look at the industries in Turks and Caicos and the Cayman Islands, their financial services sector is very, very strong. Whilst we in Jamaica, we had been talking about trying to become a financial hub for the longest while to be able to get some of those benefits, right? But we have not been able to because, I mean, there are some other things, you know, surrounding that. For example, the whole thing about de-risking. And then Jamaica being one of the largest territories, the most well-known, you know, you tend to be scrutinized a lot more. Not to say that we will be doing anything wrong, but in terms of being able to adhere to all of the requirements of the legislation internationally to show transparency and so on, very, very onerous. When you look at countries like Aruba is still now part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, although somewhat independent. They are doing pretty well, but in terms of their financial services sector, they have been blacklisted so many times to the point now where their industries, their businesses, even if you're a lawyer and you collect funds in US dollars, the amount of reporting that you have to do, the scrutiny and so on is really, really onerous, right? So you have all of these things, you know, these external factors that sometimes negate the ability that we have to really, really grow. So many outside influences, you know.
But would you say that there's a will from the European powers to make their territories richer or the other territories poorer, to say that it's better to be a colony? Or you will say it's maybe because when we became independent, we didn't manage things well, or we became, what is your point?
Yeah, my point is, I think, and it might sound very, very simple, but this is based on conversations I've had with some of these people from some of these islands. The Europeans, they like to think, or they like to say, well, I hold a piece of paradise, as it were, right? I'm not sure if there's anything beyond that. Let me give you two examples. There's a small island, very tiny island called Saba. right? Saba is like 7 square miles, like a piece of rock jutting up out of the sea in the Caribbean, yeah? They are part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, yes? Now, on Saba, nobody speaks Dutch. Everybody speaks English, right? But all of the rulings, the decrees, the constitution, everything is written in Dutch. People can't understand, right? So if you look at it, you say, well, look, if you say that I am your government, you're part of my kingdom, right? A simple thing as communication doesn't exist, right? When you go to St. Eustatius, another Dutch island, for example, yeah, there's nothing happening there. There are no benefits to the people there. But the Dutch are there with, you know, summer homes and, you know, that kind of stuff. So for me, it's somewhat kind of selfish, especially for the small, you know, islands that are still colonies, yes? There's no real tangible thing for the people there, apart from the whim, I think, of the Europeans to say, well, look, yeah, I'm still a master, I still have colonies. Again, that might be looking at it very simplistically, but there's some kind of rationale behind it.
Can you say a little bit then about St. Martin, which has both the Dutch and the French? How is there a comparison there of one side? We were there, and I just got the impression the Dutch side looked a lot more developed, if you will, than the French side. You have any input on that?
Yeah, the French side, I've been across there maybe about twice. I don't know it that much, but all I can say is the moment you cross into the French side, I mean, there's no sign. Well, there's a sign that says "Welcome to France," right? But in a straight road, you can tell the difference immediately because the French side looks very French, right? Yes. But apart from that, no, I can't.
There's no difference in how the people are doing on that island, from what you can see.
No, exactly. I wouldn't think so.
Which is interesting if you think of Haiti and Dominican Republic, same island, but mountains and.
Oh yeah, but their history is totally different.
Yeah, I know.
How they came about, yes. How they came about, yeah. It's very, 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 very different. But that's as we said, that's a whole nother long story. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Turns on both sides.
We're gonna try and wrap up now. We've been here for time. And what I'm gonna say, Doctor, honestly, thanks again for the fantastic explanation of everything and the exhibition as well. So we all learned a lot today, you know, and you know, we will be happy to have you back again anytime, you know. You're more than welcome to the platform.
Okay, good. It was my pleasure being part of the group, yes.
Thank you. I don't know if you got anything to add, because after that, our sister Christian, she's gonna pray for us. If you got anything to add before we can get to her.
Yeah, no, because we've pretty much covered quite a bit.
Yeah.
And you know, hopefully there's gonna be another time when I can, you know, give some more information on the topic, or maybe on something new. But I love these kind of general discussions. You know, you start with one thing, but then you move on. You know, it's very interesting.
It was great. It's great.
Thank you. So,
Brother Malcolm, is there any way we can get the information for the Atlanta group so that I can possibly join that group? And I wanted to tell the brother, thank you so much for all that knowledge, because you told me a lot of something that I had no idea, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. You're welcome. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, the Bamleke group in Atlanta, I'm gonna send you the link, the contact detail, everything. So if you want.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, Sister Christian, I think the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm so appreciative of Dr. Smith coming on and sharing. It was really, really good. And thank you all for listening, because Jamaica is also my home. So it's really good to share like this. Okay, so let us pray. Thank you, God, for just bringing us together as people, curious minds with a lot of questions to talk about, the past and history and what has made, us as a people. And Father God, I pray that as we're about to go our separate ways, that you'll be with us, protect us and guide us, and that the other meetings that will come, they will continue to be interesting, and we'll continue to learn from them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen.
Our DNA still remains the same, connected with those who are on the continent.
Africa, Africa, we are one.